Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, our top stories. The Prime Minister has used his speech to the Labour Party conference to unleash a blistering attack on Reform UK and its leader, Nigel Farage. President Trump has issued a deadline of 3 to 4 days for Hamas to accept his proposed peace deal for Gaza or face what he called a sad end. And the US Defence Secretary, Pete Hegseth, has told a meeting of his military top brass that he is ending woke culture and political correctness in the armed forces. Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. In the next half hour or so, we'll see what's making the headlines with the broadcaster and commentator, Duncan and the journalist and broadcaster, Sonia Sodha. Welcome to both of you, great to see you. So let's take a look at the front pages then. Sir Keir Starmer's keynote Labour conference speech, featuring on many a newspaper, including this, the front of the Metro, with his attack on Nigel Farage as a snake oil merchant and his claim that the Reform UK leader wants Britain to fail. The snake theme continues in The Star with Keir's snakes and leaders, apologies. The Financial Times describes how the Prime Minister mustered flag-waving Labour delegates for what he described as a patriotic battle against reform. Front of the Telegraph with Starmer saying, "I won't surrender our flag." As the Mirror puts it, the PM is opting for pride over prejudice, while The Guardian goes with the PM's warning that the country now faces a choice, decency or division. Nigel Farage hits back on the front of the Express, "I can clean up the almighty mess as next PM." Daily Mail joins in the criticism with the day Labour dragged politics into the gutter. The Eye focuses more on speculation that the two-child benefit cap is to be removed in the Chancellor's November budget. And finally, The Sun reports that actor Nicole Kidman has filed for divorce after 3-year separation from husband Keith Urban. So welcome to Duncan and Sonia. Goodness me, most of them leading on the same thing. Are we spotting a theme here?
Yeah.
And did they take the right tack, do you think? Duncan, you go first.
Well,
focusing this on reform.
Yeah, it's a bit of a punt, isn't it? And it's a bit of a risk. It'll be interesting to see whether or not spending the vast amount of your time on your keynote conference speech referencing another political party and its leader was the right move. I think we'll reserve judgment until a couple of days' time when we see the polls and see what happens if Labour gets a bump up or goes down, or indeed if Reform get a bit of a nudge in the upward direction. It was interesting to watch. It was borderline obsessive, I think, is the conclusion that I've reached a little bit. I can understand why, because Reform over the last 100 polls plus have had a lead over the Labour Party, and it's quite staggering when you consider this is just a political party with 5 MPs, right? You know, the Tories barely got a mention in Starmer's speech earlier. They have 121 MPs. It is a risk. I felt it somewhat bizarre seeing a lot of the Labour front bench waving little flags like they were at the seaside at one point. I don't think that quite worked.
That was so not the point of it, by the way.
But they are. Look at that. Look at that.
Yeah.
So it's. I think it is a risk, and it'll be so interesting to see what happens. And it's very clear that the Labour front bench have all been briefed to try and take out Farage. Front page of the Metro, calling him a snake oil salesman. Yeah. We've got a story knocking around tonight of David Lammy referencing the Hitler Youth and Nigel Farage, which was just bizarre. We'll get to that front page on the Mail shortly. As I say, I think it's a risk. There was no real vision. There were no policies really spelt out. There was nothing new. The NHS online stuff we knew about because it was leaked to the papers a couple of days ago. He just spent the best part of an hour bashing Reform UK.
Yes, the snake oil salesman part we'd already heard from a video by Wes Streeting after Nigel Farage had failed to condemn Donald Trump's paracetamol and pregnancy stuff. The Guardian focuses on decency or division. Just to pick up on the same sort of question, did it smack of desperation, this hyper-focus on reform, or is this a case about fighting for every single Labour councillor come the May elections next year?
Well, I think Labour are in a tricky position electorally, which is they are fighting a battle on 2 fronts. So on their right, they've got Reform, and voters who are particularly concerned about immigration. And then on their left flank, they're in danger of losing voters to parties on the left. So the Green Party, I think the Lib Dems would sort of qualify as being to the left of Labour, or as positioning themselves to the left of Labour on some issues in some areas. So Labour's sort of got to think, well, which way do we face? What key message are we trying to get across? Now, these attacks on Farage and Farage's policy on indefinite leave to remain and long-term immigration as racist were very much aimed at the Labour core, the party faithful, the people in the hall. And they went down a storm, quite frankly. People loved it. They were clapping. The issue is that I think that is a message that's attractive to core Labour voters who might be at risk of peeling off and going left, but perhaps, and only time will tell, but perhaps a little bit less attractive to people who may have been thinking about voting for reform. Because, yes, the Labour Party has been very clear. You've had several cabinet ministers be very clear. No, people who vote for reform aren't racist. It's some of these policies that are. But that is quite a tricky and complicated message to land. So I do wonder, in focusing so much on the rhetoric around reform, whether the Labour Party is holding some voters but perhaps turning some other voters off.
Very interesting.
That's the question, I think.
Yeah, Daily Mirror as well. I know you want to come in. Pride over prejudice. This idea of prejudice and division, which is not what they stand for. But at the end of the day, with almost every line he said, the freedom to live and let live, our flags flying proudly as we celebrate differences and oppose racism, you know, talking about the politics of grief and making victims of people. At the end of the road, there will be a fairer country. It was basically singing the tune of multicultural Britain, which is almost not where the public is right now because of their fear of migration.
Yeah,
and so it was definitely for the audience in the hall and not for the country.
Yeah, and I think when you look at public attitudes, I mean, I think actually the British public are really tolerant. You know, they do have concerns about immigration, but we are a far, far less racist society than we were 40 years ago. Yep. So I do think that he's onto something there. It's just that I'm not sure that what's going to win Labour the election is basically what happens to the economy in the next 3.5 years. If they pick this battle with reform on immigration, personally, I think they're going to lose.
But the message is muddled
yes.
and muddy, isn't it? Because I think most people who didn't watch the speech, and most normal people do not watch political speeches, they get their headlines from Sky News and stuff.
I totally agree with you on that.
You know, and there will be some people who just think, hang on a second, is he saying, this is Keir Starmer, if I have concerns about immigration, I'm somehow racist? Well, that's not right, that's not true. And you're absolutely right. The British people are fair and tolerant, and the immigration issue is multifaceted, isn't it? Because people talk about the Boris way, which is a form of legal migration, but we need a level of migration to this country because the NHS relies on it and social care. People crossing the channel in boats is a different form of coming to this country, and people get angry about that. And it's all this big kind of blob that needs to be gently sliced out. But I think the fear, or if I was Sir Keir Starmer, my fear would be that people will just walk away thinking, hang on a second, I'm not allowed to talk about immigration anymore, otherwise I'm going to be branded as racist.
But there's more than that too. After all this talk of respect and fairness and Britain for all, you had the new Home Secretary clamping down on rules that allow for indefinite leave to remain. So you've been talking hardball on migration, and yet you sing, you know, multicultural Britain in your keynote speech. So it felt like a sense of hypocrisy.
Yeah, but it's a really complicated message to land, because if you sort of look at what Keir Starmer was saying and put Shabana Mahmood's policies, beside it, they are not inconsistent, but it's very it's complicated to understand why they're not inconsistent. Because, you know, as I said, Keir Starmer is not saying that it's racist to have concerns about immigration, certainly not illegal immigration. It's not racist to worry about, you know, whether people are being asked to integrate as they come to Britain and as they get permanent, you know, rights to stay and live here and apply for citizenship. But you know, to say all that and get all that across when the sound bites coming out of the speech are, you know, Nigel Farage is, you know, it has racist policies and is not British, and we should sort of reject everything that he stands for. It is just too complicated a message, I think, to get across.
So we have to ask, who is it for? It was for the people in the room, and people who go to conference tend to be activists off the left of the party, and they loved it. The question is, what's the message going to be next week? Is I think what I'm asking.
He was playing to his home crowd, which is understandable. But the key message, if you're a punter, like most people watching Sky News tonight, you'll just think, what was the speech about? Oh, hello, we're not reform UK, so vote for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you still love a flag, which is the front of the Daily Telegraph. I won't surrender our flag. You know, this was the new definition of patriotism, you know, under a Labour banner, effectively, was it not?
Yes. I mean, again, I think the issue is that, personally, I think these party conference speeches are a really outdated format. Yes, they speak to people in the hall, but the reason that Labour MPs have got issues with Keir Starmer isn't to do with his ability to make a speech in the hall or not. It's because quite a few of them are worried about losing their seats at the next election.
Yeah.
That isn't going to go away. A conference speech is not going to fix that. And then a conference speech, you know, a piece of rhetoric for 53 minutes... The public don't tune into that. So it's kind of like, you know, yes, people in the hall like the speech. Does that solve any of Labour's fundamental electoral issues? No. And yes, people are saying they're happy today, and they're happy that he came out and gave a strong anti-reform message. But is that going to mollify Labour MPs in 4 weeks' time when they're looking at the polls and they're really worried?
It won't do, and I know activists who won't mention his name on the doorstep because his name is mud, so he's got that to contend with. And just to end on something a little bit positive, I will say this: I think it's one of the better speeches he has given. He started off as like a Dalek with without the charisma, got better as time went on, and you know he delivered a speech. But you're absolutely right. That was purely for the people in the auditorium, in the conference venue. There was no real message that landed with the electorate, the general public, really.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, as speeches go, it was fairly decent.
Yeah.
But I think that in the grand scheme of things, does it change any of the fundamentals? No.
So the Daily Mail, the day Labour dragged politics into the gutter, complaining about the politics of grievance and yet grieving about reform as another element of sort of hypocrisy there, isn't it? Then Lammy claims reform leader flirted with the Hitler Youth before being forced to apologise. There's things you don't say in politics, and that is...
Yeah, well, that's a real unforced error because there are unsubstantiated allegations that relate to Nigel Farage and his time at school.
How did he say that, just for people who've missed it? How did he say that?
So this was an interview that David Lammy gave, and he talked about Nigel Farage, and the quote is right on the front page of the Daily Mail, flirting with the Hitler Youth. Now, what he might have meant to have said is a while ago there was a piece by a teacher who taught Farage a long time ago at school, saying that he had an interest in the Hitler Youth or some of their songs or whatever. That is very different from saying someone flirted with the Hitler Youth. And, I mean, I don't want to be too rude about our Deputy Prime Minister, but, I mean, you know, Farage wasn't even born when the Hitler Youth was knocking around, so basic arithmetic would make it quite clear that that doesn't make any sense. But it makes you wonder how desperate Labour are to try and land some blows against reform when some of their senior politicians will come out with these remarks.
I sort of think it was an unforced error. Surely he didn't mean to say that in the way that he said it, and in fact he has rowed back. He said, you know, look, it's for the public to judge. I'm not making these claims. Quite rightly, because they are very serious claims, and unless you've got evidence of them, you really shouldn't be, you know, it's legally problematic probably to say them on a broadcaster. The reason why it is problematic is because Starmer has used some very punchy language about Farage, and quite frankly, I personally think that his description of Nigel Farage's policies that are being touted around removing people who've got an existing indefinite right to remain in the UK because they've been here, some of them for decades, and saying, we're going to take that away and put you back on a pathway where you're reapplying every 5 years. That will disproportionately affect people who've got the permanent right to live in the UK who are from ethnic minorities. So I think it's perfectly fine to argue that that is a policy that has discriminatory racist consequences. But it is very powerful, punchy language. Okay. And Reform have come back, Farage have come back and said, this is Labour inciting hatred. Yeah. It wasn't Labour inciting hatred, but when David Lammy comes out and says something loose like that he has to take a step back from, I'm afraid that is playing directly into Nigel Farage's hands.
Farage putting out a video saying the dangers of the radical left, which is Charlie Kirk-type language in America, isn't it?
It is, and just picking up on the point of language, it is important because Keir Starmer recently also described Nigel Farage as the enemy. I mean, that is a really powerful word, enemy. What do you do with your enemies, right? You try and destroy them or take them out. So language does matter when we talk about this kind of politics. And I think in the case of David Lammy and Keir Starmer, they need to think very carefully about what they continue to say. I mean, Farage has, you know, he dishes it out, so he's got to be able to take some of it.
But you do
cross a line.
coming from him.
You do cross a line, bearing in mind we do live in a country where in the past MPs have been killed on the streets because people disagree with their political stance.
So we're going to get onto the two-child benefit cap, which I think The Guardian started. It's on the front page of the Eye. Just very quickly, in one sentence, why, if they've only got 5 MPs and we're 4 years away from an election, are they so obsessed with talking about reform?
Because they're polling at 30%.
Yeah.
But why bother now?
Because they're worried that they can see the electoral threat. And that, look, it might dissipate by the time of the next election. It might grow less. But at the moment, it looks in the polls like reform is the main electoral threat for them.
They want to get in early, and I don't believe an election will happen in 4 years. I think it's going to happen a lot sooner, inside the next couple of years. And I think Labour, unless they can turn the economy around, know that.
Ooh, OK, two-child benefit cap, quickly. We know there's going to be a report. Cabinet will be told it needs to go, so tell us.
So
update.
it sounds like, so this is, and it's interesting to ask why this wasn't in Keir Starmer's speech, actually, because it's a really big policy for Labour, plays very well with the Labour kind of, Labour core voters. Personally, I think this is an absolute no-brainer. Yes, it costs £3 billion, but £3 billion is a tiny amount in the grand scheme of the sort of the hole that Rachel Reeves has got to fill. It is the quickest, but it is the quickest...
Winter fuel payments raised what, exactly?
But I personally, I would cut elsewhere in order to lift the two-child cap, because the two-child cap is lifting it is the quickest way to lift hundreds of thousands of children out of child poverty in one fell swoop.
Daily Mail is looking like very pro-reform at the moment. Daily Express, though, sticking with the Tories. Duncan,
well, I think this is the beginning because the conference is in Manchester, kicks off on Sunday. There's an exclusive interview by Sam Lister, who's a great journalist at the Daily Express, with Kemi Badenoch. And I think we're starting... This will be the beginning of the Conservative Party laying out their stall as the conference kicks off on Sunday. Let's just hope Kemi Badenoch's got some good things to say when she does her keynote speech to rally the troops, because there is a void at the moment, and currently it's being filled by Reform UK. OK, you heading up there? Yeah.
OK, enjoy. Lots more still to come, including Donald Trump threatens consequences for Hamas if they don't sign up to his Gaza peace plan. That in just a moment.
I'm David Blevins, one of Sky's US correspondents based in Washington, D.C.
Conor, what did you say to the President? What did you say?
He's had a great meeting with him. He's a great man.
David Blevins from Sky News. Fire chiefs say that they're really stretched to the limit and running out of water. What have you got to say to that? Sky News in the UK, why do you think the President should intervene on Iran?
I think Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon is an acute threat to the national security of the United States.
Free wherever you get your news.
Go ahead, back white jacket.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. He called you Daddy earlier.
No,
Do you...
He did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
Thank you.
Leicester is on its knees.
They've ripped the soul out of my factory and there's nothing left.
It is eerily quiet.
It's constantly on the brink of capacity.
There's overcrowding. It's not a new thing.
It's rough.
There's nothing to hide. Why aren't international journalists allowed in?
Are you worried about escalation?
Of course I'm worried about escalation, which is why my focus is on de-escalation.
The region, I think, is on edge because they are anticipating a retaliation.
Iran retaliates for the US attacks.
Founding principle of the alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Could Putin attack another NATO country within 5 years?
Hear that whistle and that crunch. We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
I want to start the programme today with an aim, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people this is the politics hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No,
but I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the politics hub, we like to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it?
Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, Duncan Barks and Sonia Sodha. Welcome back to both of you. Duncan, let's go to the front page of The Guardian, shall we? And this deadline now that Trump has given Hamas to respond, 3 or 4 days, as they weigh up what's in it for them, effectively.
Yeah, it's not the tightest of deadlines. It's a bit kind of like, well, 3 or 4 days. I think that the eyes of the world are waiting to see how Hamas respond to this peace plan, and the peace board, of course, featuring former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who, everything I've read over the last 24 hours, had quite an intrinsic part in putting together this peace plan. Some people said, well, look, you know, he was responsible for the Good Friday Agreement, so, you know, he knows a little bit about how to try and make things change for the better. I think all of us can agree that we want this to work for the simple reason we want to stop the violence and the bloodshed and the unnecessary death of thousands, tens of thousands of innocent people. It puts a lot of pressure on Hamas. And if they don't agree to it, Trump has essentially given Netanyahu and Israel the green light to obliterate Hamas. There's a lot at stake here. I just wonder what's going through Hamas's mind at the moment.
They've been obliterating Hamas for the last 2 years, haven't they? And that's the difficulty.
But, you know, when they did the press conference and he was standing alongside Netanyahu, it was just very clear, you need to do what you need to do. That's pretty much what he said. So, yes, you're right. Hamas have been obliterated, but I take that as a signal which is like wipe them off the face of the earth.
Well, busy time in Trump Towers, as it were. We know that Trump and Pete Hegseth, who used to be Defence Secretary, now heading the Department for War, had an extraordinary meeting with 830 senior generals telling them how to behave. You know, you can't be fat, you've got to have male standard for fitness, you know, can't have dresses, dudes in dresses, etc. You know, anti-wokery, I mean, that was a charter for anti-wokery, wasn't it? But what it means practically, I mean, it's hard for women to get onto the front line, presumably.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it does really seem, you know, a total backlash that moves the pendulum way too far in the opposite direction against kind of like some of the DEI initiatives, which I think lots of people might concede went a bit too far in the US in several areas. But this is just bonkers stuff. I mean, basically saying they're going to be like fat tests, like, so you would assume like what weigh-ins?
Yeah, twice a year it says.
Yes, yeah, well, exactly. So, you know, I assume if you're above a certain weight or above a certain BMI, you're out. And it's really
he wouldn't make it in, would he? Look,
it's an extraordinary sort of politicisation of the US armed forces, which have always understood to sort of be run by civilians and be sort of at arm's length from the American government. And, you know, to command that level of sort of bipartisan support. And you've got Democrats coming out in the US saying this really kind of detracts from that sort of level of bipartisan
Can I make a quick comment? My favourite bit about this story is the fact he doesn't want his generals to have beards, right?
Yeah, no beardos was
no
the phrase.
beardos, and he's talking about male standards need to be high. Last time I looked, the Vice President of the USA, J.D. Vance, had a beard. So what is he saying about his VP?
Yeah, he's ex-military as well, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's not in it now.
But he's not on the front line now.
Get your own house in order.
We have 1 minute left to talk about babies can be born without the need for a biological mother.
This is referring to new potential developments in fertility technology where it might be possible to create an egg from a man, basically. And I find this headline quite objectionable in some ways because it implies that you can remove women altogether from the process of creating babies. And actually what we know is that there is a practice called surrogacy. It's commercial in many countries. It's incredibly exploitative of women, particularly poor women, and it sees women as nothing more than vessels in which babies grow, and then those babies are separated from the woman that's gestated them at birth. Lots of women do say they're doing that voluntarily, in many cases in exchange for payment, but I think that's quite a dark, dystopian world.
We're running out of time. It's a fascinating story. Duncan, Sonia, thank you both very much indeed. See you for more in the 11, back with the top stories, of course.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.